Have you ever considered the hidden connections, between the most powerful people in government, the shadowy world of intelligence, and, well, the undisputed realm of organized crime?
Hmm.
What if these aren't just separate things, but actually this intricate, deeply interwoven tapestry, something spanning almost a century?
Yeah.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that.
And it's truly compelling, isn't it, how these lines have just blurred over time, creating these networks of influence, really sophisticated financial maneuvers, and even blackmail, things that have profoundly shaped major historical events.
Right.
Our goal here really is to pull out the most crucial insights from, well, a lot of incredible sources. We want to give you a shortcut to understanding this complex, often really shocking history
Yeah.
without getting totally overwhelmed by just the sheer volume of information out there.
And what a history it is. I mean, we'll explore everything from the very origins of intelligence agencies tying up with the mob during World War II
Yeah, right from the start.
to the, pervasive use of blackmail against powerful figures like J. Edgar Hoover, the labyrinthine financial schemes funding covert ops like Iran-Contra, and even the startling connections right up to recent scandals involving figures like Jeffrey Epstein, the Maxwell family, and the, major tech giants.
It all connects.
Prepare yourself for some truly profound revelations. Really, some aha moments.
Yeah.
The underworld's genesis, early alliances of spies and crooks. Okay, so let's start our journey right at the beginning. During the crucible of World War II, with something called Operation Underworld.
Right.
This was a time of extreme national urgency, partly driven actually by a huge fire on the troop transport ship Normandy right there in New York City Harbor in 42.
A massive incident.
Yeah, and then among other things, it created this palpable sense of vulnerability. It sparked this new, very pragmatic way of thinking in intelligence circles, forcing them to consider these really unconventional alliances.
And one particularly striking detail that comes out of this era is how, well, sheer desperation, or maybe just stark pragmatism facing wartime threats, led the Office of Naval Intelligence, the ONI, to directly recruit mob boss Lucky Luciano.
The actual Lucky Luciano.
The actual Lucky Luciano. And what's crucial here, you have to remember, he wasn't just, operating freely. He was serving a prison sentence at the time.
Wow.
This wasn't some backroom deal with a guy on the street. This was direct engagement with a confined, but still incredibly influential, high-profile criminal.
So the Navy went into a prison to recruit a mob boss.
Essentially, yes. The ONI was willing to make what you could call a Faustian bargain. They offered him a reduced sentence in exchange for his influence over the dock workers, preventing sabotage and gathering intelligence on Axis sympathizers within the Italian-American community.
Okay.
But this willingness, this readiness to cut deals with figures like Luciano, pulling them from prison for what was deemed the national interest, it didn't just stop with World War II. It established a dangerous precedent, a kind of playbook that, disturbingly, seems like it might have been reused decades later.
Yeah.
Think about the alleged protection of figures like Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
It's almost as if these threads, woven during wartime expediency, just found a new purpose in the shadows much later on.
So if naval intelligence is pulling a mob boss from prison for strategic reasons, and then decades later we hear about Epstein, who was labeled a Ponzi scheme mastermind in grand jury testimony just being dropped from an investigation, with these alleged intelligence ties swirling around, it's almost like this kind of protection, despite clear evidence, it has a long and troubling history. Is that the through line you're pointing to?
Absolutely. That's the core observation right there. This isn't just a one-off incident. It underscores a deeply concerning alleged pattern of protection for Epstein starting early in his career. It strongly hints at powerful connections shielding him from legal scrutiny, even when the evidence looked, well, formidable. And what's particularly telling is how the British media, as early as 1992, and then again in the early 2000s, openly reported on Epstein's alleged intelligence connections and his, frankly, astonishing 17 visits to the Clinton White House, often, reportedly, with attractive young women.
17 times?
17 times. Yet the vast majority of the American mainstream media largely ignored these revelations at the time.
Interesting.
This disparity, it speaks volumes. It suggests a very different media landscape, or perhaps different levels of control over narratives in the U.S. compared to the U.K., where these kinds of explosive claims could apparently be discussed more openly.
And lurking in the background, maybe even right in the foreground, of this willingness to do whatever it took during Operation Underworld was the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, the wartime forerunner to the CIA. What does that tell us about its early ethos? I mean, how far were they really willing to go back then?
Well, the precise role the OSS played in Operation Underworld itself isn't entirely crystal clear from all the sources, but its general operating philosophy, it certainly aligns.
Okay.
We have accounts from people like George White. He was a Federal Bureau of Narcotics agent recruited by the OSS.
Right.
White recounted this remarkable incident. He was propositioned by an organized crime associate to actually enlist Luciano himself, not just use his network, but get Luciano directly involved in exchange for a full pardon.
Wow, a pardon.
A full pardon. White found this proposition outrageous. He called it a very naive way of doing business. But even as he's voicing these moral objections, he acknowledged that this was, and this is the key phrase, even for the OSS, which was willing to do almost anything.
Willing to do almost anything. That's
Yeah.
potent.
It's incredibly revealing. It paints a picture of the early, very murky ethical landscape of U.S. intelligence, where forging alliances with known criminals, even considering pardons for major offenses, was absolutely on the table. It foreshadows this pragmatic, often ruthless approach to national security that frequently operated outside conventional legal and moral norms.
Yeah.
The fact that an agent could find it outrageous, yet still acknowledge it as characteristic of the OSS, that really highlights the breadth of their mandate and, frankly, their moral flexibility back then.
Willing to do almost anything certainly leaves a lot open to interpretation, and it raises huge questions about the long-term consequences of that kind of mindset. We also see the widespread use of propaganda during this period, especially the concept of the fifth column. How did that psychological weapon work? How was it leveraged by intelligence?
Oh, the fifth column. That idea actually originated in the Spanish Civil War back in 1936 during the Siege of Madrid. A nationalist general apparently boasted he had 4 columns advancing on the city and a 5th column of sympathizers already inside waiting to strike.
Okay, so an internal threat.
Exactly. This concept, describing the sort of domestic military in waiting of enemy agents, it became a prime component of British security coordination, or BSC, propaganda, and it was later adopted by the OSS itself.
And the goal.
Its primary function was to attack isolationists within America, those who opposed the U.S. entering the war. The goal was to sow fear and distrust among the public, painting these domestic groups, often just political opponents of intervention, as covert enemy agents involved in sabotage or subversion.
Right. Guilt by association, essentially.
Pretty much. And what makes this particularly compelling is the later revelation that Edgar Ansel Mower, a prominent Chicago journalist who was a strong promoter of this Nazi fifth column idea in America, was subsequently identified as a British intelligence asset.
A journalist working for foreign intelligence?
Correct. This unmasking underscores the early and frankly sophisticated use of fear-mongering and perception management by intelligence agencies, both foreign and domestic, using media assets to subtly influence public opinion and achieve strategic political goals. You know, this historical precedent of shaping public narratives, it certainly invites us to consider how those tactics might have evolved with modern media and communication tech.
Absolutely. It sets a concerning stage, too. Post-war expansion, entrenched networks of power, crime, and finance. But these shadows of WWII, they stretched far beyond the battlefield, didn't they? These initial, maybe pragmatic alliances, they seem to have transformed into something much more entrenched, especially in the nascent global drug trade. It feels like wartime exigencies became deeply woven into post-war intelligence.
That's a critical point. And here we really need to consider Peter Dale Scott's Operation X thesis. He argues quite meticulously that the misdirection and frankly obfuscation used by figures like Harry Anslinger, America's first drug czar, and George White, the OSS agent we just mentioned, well, it had a dual function.
Okay, what were the two functions?
First, it powerfully bolstered Cold War propaganda. Much like the fifth column tactics, it focused public attention on external communist threats, diverting attention from other activity.
Right, the external enemy.
Exactly. But second, and far more insidiously, it helped conceal the roles of specific individuals and entire networks working with Western intelligence agencies, militaries, governments, even legitimate businesses in the burgeoning global drug trade.
So, hiding complicity.
Hiding deep entanglement. The critical insight here is that the fight against external enemies, inadvertently or perhaps deliberately, laid the groundwork for a deeply compromised state, where the very mechanisms designed for national security became tools for systemic corruption and, yes, facilitating the global drug trade.
Wow.
This wasn't just a few bad apples. It was an entanglement woven into the fabric of post-war intelligence right from the start. It really raises the question, How deeply did these hidden roles compromise state institutions, leading to decades of complicity?
And how did that play out domestically?
Well, during this period, investigations into organized crime in America were demonstrably soft-pedaled, if they happened at all. And a significant reason for this suppression, the pervasive use of blackmail, particularly targeting none other than FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover.
Hoover himself was being blackmailed.
Allegedly, yes.
Yeah.
And this also served to obscure the role of the Kuomintang, the KMT, the Chinese nationalists in the drug trade, a network linked to American organized crime and Asian traffickers through connections forged way back in the interwar period in Southeast Asia.
So it's all connected intelligence ops, concealing the drug trade, blackmail at the highest levels.
Precisely. It points to systemic corruption and a deliberate suppression of investigations, with blackmail emerging as a key tool in this far-reaching compromise.
It's a disturbing thought fighting one enemy empowers another, investigations hampered by compromised individuals. And many of the figures from that OSS Asia theater, the ones schooled in covert ops, they became major players in these evolving networks of power, crime, and finance later on.
Yes, it's remarkable how they resurfaced. Let's trace some names that will definitely reappear in this deep dive. It highlights an incredible continuity of personnel.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Well, those who served in the OSS Asia theater include people like E. Howard Hunt, later a notorious CIA operative, deeply involved in coup attempts, like in Guatemala and Cuba, and eventually gained infamy as one of the Watergate plumbers.
Right, Hunt, a key Watergate figure.
Absolutely. Another is John Singlao. He went on to become a major general and a central player in the Iran-Contra affair, leading a private network of operatives.
Iran-Contra, okay.
And then there was Paul Helliwell, an attorney, an OSS veteran. He would later become one of the key architects of convoluted shadow banking strategies and a primary node, a crucial connecting point between the worlds of intelligence and organized crime.
So the skills transferred.
Yes, exactly. It highlights this clear continuity of personnel and the transfer of covert skills, originally honed for wartime service, into other, often illicit ventures. We also have William R. Pierce, who headed OSS Detachment 101. He personally oversaw KMT commando operations against Chinese Communist forces in Burma.
Right.
Pierce later made a startling disclosure about significant payment issues, problems financing OSS operations in Asia. It hints at the financial complexities and ethical compromises right from the beginning, often involving, off-book funding sources.
This continuity really emphasizes the long-term impact. Individuals trained in covert tactics, transitioning into roles that just blurred the lines between state service and illicit activities, often involving finance and crime on a global scale. It's incredible how these figures, trained in the shadows, reappear decades later in major scandals, almost like a revolving door between state service and these clandestine networks. And speaking of powerful names, the story of the Bronfman family, famous for Seagram's liquor, takes a fascinating turn when you look at their origins. What's the real story there beyond the polished image?
Well, one particularly striking detail is that the Bronfman family's drug company, despite that official name, primarily focused on alcohol. Sam Bronfman, the patriarch, built this vast, intricate network of American and Canadian distilleries and bootleggers. It was absolutely essential during Prohibition in the U.S.
So inherently illicit at the time.
Inherently illicit. It forced him into deep engagement with the underworld. Meyer Lansky, one of the most notorious mobsters of that era, later remarked rather bitterly in his old age. He said, "Why is Lansky a gangster? And not the Bronfman and Rosenstyle families. I was involved with all of them in the 1920s, although they do not like to talk about it and change the subject when my name is mentioned."
Wow, from Lansky himself.
Directly from Lansky. It really makes you ask, how are reputations laundered for some but not others when the origins are so deeply intertwined with organized crime? The contrast between public image and alleged reality is stark.
Yeah.
And further underscoring this hidden history, there was an attempt to write a biography of Samuel Bronfman. It was reportedly abandoned because the author apparently found out things about Sam they didn't want me to write about. This strongly suggests suppressed ties to organized crime and a deliberate effort to control the historical narrative of this prominent family.
That's a powerful indictment. And the suppressed biography really drives home the point that some histories are carefully curated. Beyond the financial connections, blackmail emerges as a key tool for control within these networks, used by figures in both the underworld and, disturbingly, the highest levels of government. Let's look at how people like liquor magnate Louis Rosenstyle and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover allegedly used it.
Louis Rosenstiel, a figure linked to the Bronfmans, was known for taking surveillance to an extreme, even within his own operations. He reportedly placed bugging devices all through his offices, and microphones, often hidden, in his home.
Why?
His alleged purpose: to record conversations for potential blackmail against guests, even his own employees. There are accounts of him, leaving a room, maybe going to the bathroom, specifically to give employees time to compromise themselves while he was gone, recording their private chats. It reveals this deeply manipulative, calculating approach to gathering leverage. Now contrast that, or maybe compare it, with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. His own private sex life, including persistent rumors about homosexuality and cross-dressing, was known to both the mob and intelligence communities for years. He was likely used to being blackmailed himself by this point, which made him vulnerable.
Okay.
However, Hoover turned the tables. He systematically amassed his own massive collection of blackmail through his infamous secret files, what became known as his thick dossier on powerful people all across Washington and beyond.
So he weaponized secrets.
He leveraged this trove of compromising information to gain favors, manipulate political outcomes, and, crucially, to maintain his iron grip on the FBI directorship for nearly 50 years. Richard Helms, former OSS vet, later CIA director, corroborated this. He claimed Hoover played a very skillful game with knowledge of the sexual habits of prominent people.
A skillful...
It reveals this deeply cynical, mutually exploitative system, where blackmail became a pervasive mechanism of control, not just for criminals, but for figures within the highest echelons of government and intelligence. It highlights a culture of pervasive surveillance and profound moral compromise, right at the heart of American power. 3. Global nexus: organized crime, state building, and financial shadowlands.
The narrative takes an even darker turn when we realize the influence of these networks stretched far beyond American borders, directly impacting global geopolitical events, even touching the formation of new states. It's a truly unexpected connection.
Yeah, it really broadens the scope. A crucial aspect here is that the New York Times reported Samuel Bronfman, the same liquor magnate, helped finance a secret purchase of arms for Israel right after World War II.
Secret arms purchases.
Not just a minor contribution, but a clandestine effort to arm a nascent state. Then you have the Sunborn Institute, an activist collaboration of Zionist millionaires. It later served as a model for the Mega Group, a powerful, discreet, philanthropic network. Its chief asset was a man named Yehuda Arazi, a Haganah operative, an old hand at gun running. He masterfully developed this impressive roster of international contacts, specifically to set up front companies for arms smuggling into Palestine.
So active illicit procurement.
Absolutely. And then there's the mobster Joseph Banjo Ziccarelli, a figure explicitly alleged to have been involved in the traffic of arms and munitions sold to the government of Israel and other nations too: Cuba, Mexico, Venezuela, Nicaragua.
Wow, quite a list.
Ziccarelli, who is close to Carmine Galante of the Bonan Mafia family and deeply involved in the infamous French Connection heroin trade, illustrates this direct, alarming link between organized crime and clandestine state-building efforts.
Yeah.
This connection, it's truly fascinating. It challenges conventional narratives of how nations secure their early foundations, revealing this shadowy, pragmatic reliance on illicit networks.
It really shows how deep these connections run, directly impacting history on a global scale. And when you have that much illicit activity, whether for state building or just pure criminal enterprise, you absolutely need sophisticated ways to hide and move the money.
Exactly.
This is where the shadowy world of offshore banking truly comes into its own right.
Indeed. What was taking shape, according to our sources, was this elaborate daisy chain of offshore banks.
A daisy chain, explain that.
It refers to this convoluted network where funds move sequentially through multiple shell companies and financial institutions, often in different countries. It's specifically designed to obscure the money's true origin, its ultimate destination, and the identities of who's controlling it. Makes legal traceability incredibly difficult.
Okay, layers of concealment.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Banks like Castle Bankton Trust, deeply connected to Paul Helliwell, the OSS veteran turned shadow banking architect we mentioned, and his partner Cantor, they were at the forefront of this emerging system.
Helliwell again.
Helliwell again. This chain also explicitly included the Lansky-controlled Bank of Rural Commerce, used to move vast sums of hot money and casino skim funds abroad. And Helliwell and Cantor weren't just in banking. They were also deeply implicated in land fraud via a company called International Computerized Land Research, ICLR, using Bahamian bank secrecy to obscure Cantor's hidden partnerships.
So branching out.
And more connections. Bruce Rappaport, a businessman and underworld operator linked to Helliwell, was at the ground floor of Intermaritime Bank, an institution controlled by a close friend of future CIA Director William J. Casey.
Casey, wow, that name will come up again.
It certainly will. This highlights how a sophisticated financial infrastructure wasn't just coincidental. It was purposefully built to facilitate global illicit flows, merging intelligence, organized crime, and high finance into this powerful hidden system. A system that continues to operate in various forms, even today.
It's a whole parallel financial universe being created, specifically designed to evade scrutiny. And these criminal connections, they weren't just operating overseas or in these financial shadowlands. They were deeply embedded in American political machines, particularly in the notoriously influential landscape of New York City.
Oh, absolutely. The influence of the National Crime Syndicate over top New York politicians wasn't just considerable, it was deeply ingrained. For instance, Meyer Lansky, known to have made significant donations to the campaigns of Al Smith, the influential governor of New York in the 1920s, and a top figure in Tammany Hall, the powerful Democratic machine.
Tammany Hall, synonymous with corruption.
Exactly. Despite numerous attempts to clean up its image, Tammany Hall consistently remained closely enmeshed with the city's criminal underworld. Then you have Roy Cohn's father, Albert Cohn, a powerful figure himself, deep in Democratic politics, closely allied with Edward Flynn, a protege of the notorious Tammany boss Charles Murphy. Flynn, despite his political prominence, later moved to actively protect the mob-linked politician William O'Dwyer, who was, quite tellingly, a famous family friend of the Cohns.
A family friend, right.
It just demonstrates this long, undeniable history of intertwined political and criminal power. And it wasn't just influence peddling. Look at Bernard Marcus, once hailed as a financial wizard for his Bank of the United States. Later revealed as a brazen fraudster, his bank collapsed in scandal.
Yeah.
Decades later, Roy Cohn himself, with his own history of legal and ethical issues, engaged in illegal financial schemes involving his uncle's company, Lionel, explicitly collaborating with associates of mobster Mo Dalitz.
It just keeps circling back.
It exposes the deep historical corruption within American political structures, showing precisely how organized crime wielded influence through campaign donations, protecting complicit politicians, and direct involvement in large-scale financial fraud.
Yeah.
It really makes you ask, how much has this legacy shaped the political landscape we see today?
War.
Cold War, covert operations, and domestic scandals.
The onset of the Cold War, then, provided whole new arenas for these complex networks to operate and expand their influence, often with far-reaching, maybe unintended consequences that still echo through history.
It's remarkable how these alliances just continue to evolve. Figures like General Erskine, for example. He ran the military wing of the survey mission to Southeast Asia in 1950. He worked directly with anti-communist interests, aligned with the domestic China lobby, that powerful pro-Kuomintang group.
Okay.
He developed military strategies to support KMT fighters, specifically in Burma and Thailand, essentially creating an insurgency. This is the birth of Operation Paper.
Operation Paper.
A clandestine program that directly involved CIA operatives like the mob-linked banker and OSS veteran Paul Helliwell, whom we keep encountering.
Helliwell's back again.
He's central. Arms flowed to these KMT forces via Sea Supply, a front company Helliwell himself organized, specifically designed to mask the origin and destination of these covert weapons shipments. Peter Dale Scott has compellingly argued this was a key point in the development of U.S. intelligence complicity in the global drug trade, marking, at the very least, major indirect support, if not outright facilitation, for drug traffickers.
So fighting communism meant enabling the drug trade.
That's the disturbing implication. It really begs the question. How much were these intelligence operations inadvertently or maybe deliberately creating larger, more enduring problems, actively entrenching the global drug trade for decades in pursuit of short-term geopolitical goals? This connection, linking the OSS legacy via Helliwell to active Cold War ops, truly reveals how fighting communism intertwined with facilitating the drug trade and using deceptive front companies. It profoundly underscores the morally ambiguous nature of covert warfare.
It's a disturbing thought. Fighting one enemy might have empowered another, creating systemic issues that persist for generations. Now, let's pivot to one of America's most iconic political scandals, Watergate. We all know the broad strokes, right? A third-rate burglary gone wrong.
The standard narrative, yeah.
But what if there was a far more intricate web behind it, woven with blackmail, deep intelligence ties, going far beyond just a botched break-in?
Well, what truly stands out in this alternate account is how interwoven the threads of power, crime, and information really were, Consider journalist Jack Anderson, a key figure in the Watergate era renowned for breaking explosive stories.
Right, the muckraker.
Exactly. But our sources reveal Anderson himself had surprising ties to suspect banks. He held accounts, even stock, in Diplomat National Bank. And on the board there, Anna Chennault, highly influential, connected to the China lobby, the Korean CIA, KCIA, and the Unification Church.
Wow, that's quite a mix.
Isn't it? Furthermore, Anderson owned complementary shares in the District of Columbia National Bank, an institution organized by Democratic fixer Bobby Baker and Ed Levinson, a notorious organized crime insider.
Okay, so the journalist himself had ties to organized crime and intelligence-linked figures.
That's the picture painted here. This convergence of interests, political, criminal, intelligence surrounding a prominent journalist like Anderson, is quite remarkable. It raises profound questions about the very channels of information during that critical period, suggesting that even the media sources the public relied on might have been compromised or influenced by these powerful hidden networks. It adds a really complex layer to the whole Watergate narrative.
So the information itself might have been part of a larger, more clandestine game, manipulating public perception. But the narrative takes an even darker turn when some sources suggest the official story, the botched burglary, might just be the tip of the iceberg, leading some to argue it was less an accident and more a meticulously orchestrated event, a controlled demolition from within. How does that theory hold up when we look closer?
That theory gains significant weight when you examine the pre-existing surveillance networks and the, let's say, unusual timing of certain events. Consider this. There was a raid on Philip Bailey's operation. Bailey was reportedly running a high-end call-girl ring out of apartments. And these apartments were supposedly rigged with recording equipment and two-way mirrors, a perfect blackmail setup.
Right.
Critically, this raid took place shortly before the money was provided for the infamous Watergate break-ins. Now, that's a key piece of circumstantial evidence suggesting pre-existing surveillance capabilities that could have been leveraged.
The timing is suspicious.
Very. Then, White House counsel John Dean, a central figure in the cover-up, reportedly suggested another break-in to get DNC Chairman Larry O'Brien's files, a scheme that, according to some accounts, had actually been Dean's idea from the start, making his later testimony against Nixon even more complex.
So an insider pushing for the very actions that caused the scandal.
Exactly. You have an existing surveillance apparatus and then a White House insider pushing for the trigger event. And the threads don't end there. Even the aftermath points to deeper connections. Watergate Special Prosecutor Leon Jaworski, the man tasked with finding the truth, had previously signed off on CIA funds as a trustee of the M.D. Anderson Foundation, a known conduit for agency money.
Raising questions about impartiality.
Big questions. And journalist Jack Anderson, after Watergate, went even further. He accused pages and congressional aides of being couriers for the dealing of drugs, suggesting a broader sex scam at the heart of Washington. Joseph Califano Jr., an old Watergate familiar, later led an inquiry into these very allegations.
Wow.
So, when you piece these elements together, the pre-existing surveillance, the internal motivations, the alleged intelligence agency links to the investigation itself, the hints of wider corruption, it paints a far darker, more complex picture of Watergate. It makes the notion of a controlled demolition, where the scandal unfolded as a pre-programmed outcome, rather than an accident, deeply unsettling and, frankly, compelling, via Iran-Contra and the private CIA.
So let's peel back the layers on this. From the complex, maybe controlled demolition of Watergate, we move into the era of Iran-Contra, where a private CIA seemed to operate with, well, alarming impunity. This was a period just rife with covert action, shadowy figures, and a real blurring of lines between official government ops and unsanctioned freelance intelligence work.
And what truly stands out here is the operational base and the key personnel involved in these later independent covert ops. The CIA's Miami station, known as JM-Way, was a crucial training ground during the Cold War.
Right, the hub for anti-Castro operations.
Exactly. And here, figures like Ted Shackley, a legendary CIA operative, Thomas Clines, and Felix Rodriguez, who's notorious for his role in Che Guevara's death and was a major player in Iran-Contra, they formed these really close alliances. This crew became exceptionally adept at wet works, the euphemism for assassinations and other black operations. It suggests this continuity of covert methods and personnel across different theaters and administrations. The skills honed at JM Wave were highly specialized, often lethal, and in a really damning assessment, the Naval Intelligence Chief overseeing a related operation, Task Force 157, or TF-157, determined that it was simply out of control.
Out of control, that's quite an admission from within.
It's a critical detail. It hints at covert operations running far beyond official oversight, raising serious questions about accountability and the potential for rogue elements to wield significant power, essentially forming their own parallel intelligence apparatus outside of normal government structures.
Out of control sounds like an understatement given the scale and potential danger. What happens next is truly compelling because the connections here, they reach the very top of American politics, directly to the highest office and those aspiring to it.
Yeah, this is where it gets really high level. A crucial aspect to consider is the work of journalist Pete Bruton. He meticulously investigated what he called a private intelligence network, a system reportedly architected by none other than George H.W. Bush,
The Elder Bowl.
the elder Bush. This network, according to Bruton, was set up after Bush was allegedly rebuffed by President Carter for the CIA directorship, suggesting a desire to maintain covert influence outside the official channels. Bush's allies in this network included influential figures like oilman William Blakemore II, who was president of the Gulf and Caribbean Foundation, an entity known to have funneled funds to the Contras.
Right.
Another key figure was Robert Corson, later indicted for money laundering and fraud. Corson reportedly worked directly with a CIA-adjacent arms dealer named Richard Brennicke to launder money for the CIA, specifically for Contra operations.
Laundering money for the CIA itself.
That's the allegation Bruton investigated. And what's even more intriguing, perhaps alarming, is that Brennicke's sophisticated money laundering methods were apparently of immense interest to Israeli intelligence, which allegedly studied them with the aid of Promise software.
Promise again. That software keeps popping up.
It does. Remember, Promise was initially designed for legal case tracking, but its power lay in tracking vast amounts of disparate data, financial transactions, human movements, identifying patterns, an incredibly valuable and some alleged dangerous surveillance tool. So this is where the threads of intelligence, illicit finance, foreign interests, they really begin to tightly knot together, revealing the alleged direct involvement of high-level political figures in setting up covert networks, illicit financial operations, linking them to drug trafficking, intelligence, and even advanced surveillance tech like Promise. It strongly suggests a deep state operating parallel to official government structures with potentially global reach.
That's a staggering claim, a high-ranking figure setting up a parallel intelligence network. And these networks, of course, needed robust financial pipelines, institutions that could move and obscure vast sums of money. And they found them in some truly unexpected places, often with these long-standing shadowy connections.
It's remarkable how established financial institutions served as these critical conduits. Riggs Bank, for example, explicitly described by the Wall Street Journal as having a long-standing relationship with a central intelligence agency.
A known relationship.
A known relationship. This bank held accounts for incredibly influential figures, including Prince Bandar bin Sultan of Saudi Arabia. And here's the kicker. Bandar's contact information later mysteriously appeared in Jeffrey Epstein's infamous contact book.
Wow, bridging decades of activity right to Epstein.
Decades. Riggs Bank, incidentally, pleaded guilty to money laundering in 2005, highlighting its role in these shadow dealings and its complicity. We also see figures like Herman Beebe, a notorious SNL fraudster and mob insider. His banking interests were intertwined with Gerald Smith, the right-hand man of powerful Houston developer and political fundraiser Walter Mischer. And further connecting these dots, John H. Duncan Sr. of the Bank of the Southwest, which was directly linked to CIA funding conduits. This pattern highlights how established financial institutions, often operating under a veil of legitimacy, served as crucial arteries for intelligence operations and illicit funds, engaging in questionable practices with apparent impunity. The direct link to Epstein through Prince Bandar is a crucial modern connection, suggesting a continuous network of influence and illicit finance operating across decades.
It seems like these banks weren't just passive players, but were perfectly positioned, almost by design, for this kind of shadowy work. Now, the Iran-Contra story also brings up the October surprise plot, a truly explosive allegation about clandestinely influencing a U.S. presidential election.
Ah, yes, the October surprise. What truly stands out in this account is the alleged series of clandestine high-stakes meetings. Groups like Le Circle, a secretive foreign policy forum, involve old CIA hands like Donald Jameson and James Critchfield, both close to Ted Shackley, that key figure in the private intelligence networks.
Right, the Shackley network again.
Also involved was Brian Crozier, who'd previously answered to Cordmeyer in the CIA's covert action staff, indicating deep ties to the agency's clandestine ops. These meetings apparently set the stage for something even more audacious.
Okay, what happened?
Shortly after Crozier met with Ronald Reagan, the French intelligence chief, Alexandre de Montmartre, met with Reagan's campaign manager, William Casey, in Paris.
Hmm?
This meeting took place 1 month before the infamous Madrid meetings, widely suspected to be central to the October surprise plot.
The alleged deal to delay the hostages.
The alleged deal to delay the release of American hostages in Iran until after the 1980 election to undermine Jimmy Carter. And a State Department cable later confirmed Casey was indeed in Madrid for purposes unknown during this critical period, which only deepens the mystery and suspicion.
Purposes unknown.
Very convenient, isn't it? We also see Cyrus Hashemi, with his extensive oil contacts in Iran, Nigeria, Tunisia, and Shaheen, in contact about a Newfoundland refinery, adding another layer of complex international dealings. The names logged into the Hotel Ritz guest records for these Madrid meetings, Abdulali Hashmi, Jamshid Kalash, Parsa Jamshid, they just add to the intrigue surrounding these highly sensitive discussions. It really forces the question, what was truly discussed in these clandestine meetings? And did it indeed alter the course of an election by delaying the release of American hostages? The implications for democratic processes are profound.
The idea of a U.S. election being influenced by such secret international dealings is profoundly unsettling. And the complexities of Iran-Contra wasn't just one singular covert operation, right? It involved multiple, often competing factions and agendas, creating this chaotic landscape of shadow activities.
Indeed. The Iran-Contra affair involved what amounted to competing factions within this private intelligence network. You had the Enterprise, a covert operation backed by William Casey, then CIA director, staffed by figures from the Shackley network focused on supporting the Contras.
Okay, the Casey-backed group.
But then there was also the Supermarket, a separate, more decentralized operation which journalists Cohn and Monks reported was popular among influential Contra supporters in Miami.
And Miami was key.
Miami was key. This was precisely where Jeb Bush, then prominent in Florida politics, was allegedly doing private fundraising and involved in gun running. This highlights the struggle for control and resources within the broader private CIA. It suggests that even within these covert ops, there were competing agendas, different backers, some potentially involved in drug trafficking, as chillingly seen with Barry Seal's DEA sting that explicitly connected Sandinistas to the Medellin cartel. We also uncover Rick Wade from the POW-MIA movement, who developed contacts with the Haitian opium warlord Vang Pao in Southeast Asia. Another thread, tying intelligence networks to the drug trade.
It's sprawling.
And in Mena, Arkansas, there was this ongoing operation involving figures like Reinhardt, whose St. Lucia Airways was a known CIA proprietary firm facilitating illicit activities. And what's truly alarming, pointing to high-level interference, is that William Barr, then Attorney General, later instructed the removal of Minda investigation files.
Barr ordered files removed.
Allegedly, yes, effectively obstructing inquiries into these deeply troubling connections. This demonstrates the chaotic, often contradictory nature of covert ops, where private interests and government objectives converged, sometimes leading to direct or indirect complicity in illicit activities like drug and arms trafficking, with alleged interference at the highest levels of law enforcement.
That's a lot of deeply intertwined operations. And the alleged suppression of information about Menna, orchestrated by a sitting attorney general, is highly troubling. It points to a sophisticated cover-up. The plot thickens significantly here because all these threads, mob ties, covert ops, financial fraud, might have converged into one terrifying truth through what journalist Danny Casolaro called the octopus.
Yes, the octopus. What truly stands out in this part of the account is how these seemingly disparate threads just weave together into this single chilling narrative. Consider the systematic looting of Investors Overseas Services, IOS, a massive mutual fund with deep Meyer-Lansky connections.
Okay.
It was investigated by the SEC under Stanley Sporkin. The investigation was greenlit by Sporkin's boss, none other than William Casey, the same William Casey, future CIA director.
Casey again.
But Casey abruptly pumped the brakes on the investigation after Robert Vesco, a central figure in the IOS scheme, a fugitive financier, made a staggering $250,000 campaign contribution to Richard Nixon's re-election campaign.
A donation stopped the investigation.
Allegedly. And a portion of that money, incredibly, was later confirmed to have funded the infamous Watergate break-ins, directly linking this massive financial fraud to the political scandal.
Wow.
Furthermore, Casey himself had intertwined business interests with Vesco's through a company called Multiponics, suggesting a profound conflict of interest and leading to charges of fraud against IOS.
Huh.
This forms a crucial, murky backstory to the Promise software scandal.
Right, bring us back to Promise and Casolaro.
Promise, as we discussed, that powerful software for tracking disparate data. Journalist Danny Casolaro tragically investigated what he termed the octopus, this sprawling, tentacled network of intelligence agencies, organized crime, sophisticated financial fraud, which he believed utilized Promise software.
What did he think Promise was doing?
He alleged Promise was central to this network, capable of tracking everything from illicit cash flows to human movements used for financial crimes, hunting dissidents, making it the ultimate surveillance tool.
And then he died.
He was found dead in a West Virginia hotel room. His death officially ruled a suicide. However, his family and many others vehemently doubted this ruling due to a confluence of deeply suspicious circumstances.
Like what?
He had received multiple death threats. The manner of death was inconsistent with a typical suicide. His crucial notes were missing from the scene. And there were glaring FBI inconsistencies, allegations of lying to Congress, pressuring agents involved in the case, and incredibly losing 90% of the files related to the investigation.
Losing 90% of the files, that's unbelievable.
It's deeply troubling. This section unveils a deeply disturbing narrative where high-level financial fraud, political donations, intelligence operations are intimately linked, and where a journalist's relentless pursuit of the truth allegedly led to his suspicious death. The implications for government transparency and accountability are profound and remain deeply unsettling. 6. The Clinton era. Chinagate, Epstein's ascent, and digital surveillance.
Now let's delve deeper into this. Fast forward from those Cold War shadows, the deep intricacies of Iran-Contra, to the 1990s. And we see familiar patterns: influence, finance, clandestine networks reemerging, particularly with Jeffrey Epstein gaining, well, unprecedented access to the Clinton White House. This wasn't just casual, it was a deeply ingrained presence.
It's remarkable how quickly Epstein gained that access. He reportedly visited the Clinton White House a startling 17 times, often accompanied, as noted in various accounts, by attractive young women.
17 times, that's a lot.
It is, and his very first visit, early '93, was signed off by Robert Rubin, who would later become a powerful Treasury Secretary, underscoring the high-level endorsements he got right from the start.
Okay.
Epstein was also involved in a donor dinner tied to White House redecoration efforts. Seems innocuous, right? But it becomes profoundly unsettling when you consider it was eerily mentioned in Vince Foster's alleged suicide note.
Wait, Epstein was mentioned in Foster's note?
The redecoration fundraiser he was involved in was mentioned. That note, whose authenticity is debated, reportedly implicated Hillary Clinton and the Usher's office in excessive costs and schemes related to that redecoration, hinting at deeper, potentially illicit connections far beyond a simple social call.
Wow.
Moreover, Prosperia, a real estate attorney and a very close Epstein associate who actively facilitated an early Epstein-Clinton connection, later visited Epstein a remarkable 20 times in prison.
20 visits in prison.
20 times. So it really begs the question, what was the true purpose of Epstein's frequent White House visits and his burgeoning influence? Especially considering these highly suspicious circumstances around the Foster note and his consistent connections to powerful figures. This section directly links Epstein to the highest levels of political power, not just through donations but direct access and alleged involvement in controversies touching even high-ranking officials' deaths. That direct reference in Foster's note is particularly compelling and deeply unsettling.
The mention of that fundraiser in Vince Foster's alleged note truly makes that connection chilling, hinting at a web far more sinister than surface politics. But the narrative takes an even darker turn when we realize that while Epstein was allegedly gaining this White House access, another major scandal was unfolding concurrently: Chinagate, with startling connections to technology transfers and influence peddling from a major geopolitical rival.
And what truly stands out here is the sheer breadth and depth of the influence peddling. John Huang, a key figure from the Lippo Group, a major DNC fundraiser, was directly involved in efforts to rescue BCCI's Hong Kong branch by courting China Resources, known as the Chinese government's agent for all of the PRC's foreign trade corporations. That signals high-level, state-backed financial maneuvering right away. Then there's Charlie Try, a close personal friend of Bill Clinton. He created an import-export business after Clinton's encouragement. Try proceeded to bring no fewer than 8 delegations of Chinese officials to the U.S., struggling for legitimate business but clearly gaining unparalleled access and influence. He later partnered with Englap Seng, a Macau developer with deep ties to the Chinese government.
8 delegations.
8. Mark Middleton, on the payroll of the Riadi family, Lipo Group, allegedly sought illegal Kuomintang donations and met Chinese officials privately in Hong Kong controversially, even holding private meetings in a hotel bedroom.
Mm.
We also see Johnny Chung, another DNC fundraiser, using a network of straw donors to gain access to the First Lady's office. He arranged meetings with both Energy and Treasury secretaries for Chinese corporations. He specifically aided Liu Chaoying, VP of China Aerospace International Holdings, whose father, General Ru Huaqing, was at the time the most senior general of China's military.
The top military general's daughter getting meetings via straw donors.
Exactly. All of this points to a concerted, multifaceted effort to leverage political connections for foreign interests, systematically unraveling this intricate web of foreign influence, political donations, business dealings during the Clinton administration, revealing widespread attempts by Chinese entities to gain access and leverage within the U.S. government at the highest levels. It was systematic.
That's a staggering amount of access being granted to foreign officials with direct ties to the Chinese military. And these influence operations, they weren't just about money or access. They were about transferring critical, sensitive technology with potentially devastating national security implications.
This is where the story becomes deeply alarming. Bernard L. Schwartz, CEO of Laurel, a major defense contractor, made significant donations to the DNC shortly thereafter, rewarded with a coveted spot on Commerce Secretary Ron Brown's plane for a trade mission to China.
Pay to play, looks like.
It certainly looks that way. Following this, Laurel subsequently secured a lucrative deal for cellular service in China. However, a failed rocket launch later revealed an unauthorized transfer of missile technology to China by Laurel.
Missile technology.
Missile technology. Despite warnings from the intelligence community about the national security risks, President Clinton controversially continued to sign waivers for satellite exports to China.
Even after the unauthorized transfer?
Even after. Then, in 1996, a truly suspicious event occurred. Ron Brown's plane crashed in Croatia, killing him and high-ranking Commerce Department officials who were, at that time, probing fundraising ties related to the burgeoning Chinagate scandal.
The timing.
The timing is extremely suspect. Air Force Colonel William Gormley, who examined Brown's body, publicly disagreed with the initial assessment of a gunshot wound, noting a distinct lack of an exit wound. More disturbingly, X-rays reportedly showed a lead snowstorm, bullet fragments around the wound.
Bullet fragments, not a crash injury.
Exactly. And there are serious allegations that these X-rays, crucial evidence in a potential homicide investigation, were deliberately destroyed.
Destroyed evidence. Again.
So it really forces the question, was Ron Brown's death directly connected to the ongoing Chinagate investigations and the systemic transfer of sensitive military technology to a foreign power? This presents a deeply troubling scenario. Political donations directly facilitating sensitive tech transfer, followed by the suspicious death of a cabinet secretary amid an active investigation. The alleged destruction of crucial evidence is a critical, alarming detail that just screams of a cover-up at the highest levels.
The destruction of evidence is always a blaring red flag. And the timing here, amidst an investigation into sensitive tech transfers, is incredibly suspicious. Suggests far more than an accident.
Let's delve deeper into this. The figures around Epstein, particularly Leslie Wexner, bring us back to the heart of these interwoven networks, revealing even more unexpected and disturbing connections, particularly to foreign intelligence. Yeah, it's truly compelling how these connections surface. Leslie Wexner's associates were reportedly just mystified by his profound, seemingly unquestioning trust in Jeffrey Epstein, whom they saw as an outsider with a thin resume, scant legitimate financial experience.
Right.
Yet Epstein rapidly ascended to positions of power within Wexner's empire. He appeared as president of Wexner Investment Company, vice president and treasurer of Parkview, both located in the Huntington Center in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
This center itself was largely controlled by Gerald D. Hines, a Houston real estate developer, whose high-profile projects like Houston's Galleria were notorious for being tied to Marcos family money, and Adnan Khashoggi, that prominent arms dealer and financier deeply involved with Marcos family finances and suspect real estate dealings. The financial and criminal connections here are extensive.
Khashoggi again. Wow.
And Wexner himself, in this deeply revealing interview with New York Magazine, described his personal demon, or Dybbuk, a malicious possessing spirit in Jewish folklore. A Dybbuk. The fact that he chose to describe his inner torment this way, opting for a malevolent spirit over a righteous one, says a lot for a man who has since used his billions to shape both mainstream Jewish identity and leadership in both the U.S. and Israel for decades. according to our sources.
That's a strange choice of words.
It is. Furthermore, Wexner's father-in-law, Yehuda Koppel, played a crucial role in opening the first U.S. office of El Al Airlines, which has long been identified as a known Israeli intelligence front.
El Al as an intelligence front.
Widely reported as such. Adding to this, Livia Chertoff, the mother of former Homeland Security head Michael Chertoff, actually participated in Mossad operations, like Operation Magic Carpet, while working for El Al.
So direct family ties to Mossad operations via El Al.
Correct. This network reveals the profound influence Epstein gained within Wexner's vast empire, linking him to immense wealth, international real estate, figures associated not only with organized crime, but also directly with foreign intelligence, particularly Israeli intelligence. Wexner's choice of the debunk metaphor adds this psychological, symbolic layer to his complex character and influence, especially given his later philanthropy aimed at shaping Jewish identity. 7. The modern blackmail machine. Tech, surveillance, and global power.
So what does this all mean for understanding how these networks evolved? The Maxwell family saga, it isn't just about their notorious father, Robert. It's about a clear continuation of intelligence-linked activities right into the digital age, with unsettling implications for political figures and global power dynamics.
What truly stands out in this account is the shocking continuity. After Robert Maxwell's suspicious death found drowned near his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, reportedly shredded all incriminating documents on that very yacht.
Shredded documents on the yacht.
That action strongly suggests intimate knowledge of his secrets and a deliberate, urgent move to conceal them. Ghislaine then underwent this profound rebranding, transitioned from socialite to internet operator.
Right.
She became intimately involved in a sexual blackmail operation with Jeffrey Epstein. And according to former Israeli intelligence official Ari Ben-Menashe, this operation was allegedly conducted on behalf of Israeli intelligence, specifically to blackmail President Bill Clinton.
Blackmail Clinton for Israeli intelligence, that's the claim.
That is the direct claim from Ben-Menashe reported in the sources. Meanwhile, Ghislaine's twin sisters, Christine and Isabel Maxwell, continued their father's intelligence-linked work with promise in the burgeoning tech sector.
The sisters were involved with Promise Tech.
Yes, they founded companies like Research on Demand and developed the Magellan search engine, which even became a search option for Microsoft's MSN. This illustrates a family deeply embedded in intelligence operations, seamlessly transitioning from traditional media and publishing to the emerging world of information technology. It also demonstrates the evolution of blackmail tactics, moving from physical documents to leveraging digital information and compromising human intelligence. That direct allegation of sexual blackmail against a sitting U.S. president is extremely significant and points to a sophisticated, ongoing operation with profound geopolitical implications.
That's a truly explosive claim, sexual blackmail against a U.S. president. It completely transforms our understanding of the Maxwell family's activities beyond their father's legacy. But the plot thickens even further, because Jeffrey Epstein, he wasn't just a financier, he was a node in this global influence operation that adapted seamlessly to the times, always finding new ways to exploit power, vulnerability, and information.
It's remarkable how Epstein built his network. Douglas Leese, that shadowy figure involved with the Raxol Group and its shady banking practices, was instrumental in introducing Epstein to Stephen Hoffenberg, whose Towers Financial Corporation became one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history, defrauding investors of hundreds of millions.
The Hoffenberg connection.
Hoffenberg, who worked closely with Epstein, described him as a genius at selling securities, but chillingly added, with no moral compass.
A genius with no moral compass. Dangerous combination.
Incredibly dangerous. Epstein possessed multiple passports, a key tool for international mobility and evasion, including an expired Austrian one under another name. This passport was found with $70,000 in cash and 48 small diamonds, hinting at deep ties to covert operations and prepared escape routes.
Multiple passports, cash, diamonds. That sounds like a spy novel.
It really does. Ari Ben-Menashe, the former Israeli intel official, claimed Epstein was frequently present at Robert Maxwell's London office, and that Ghislaine was also involved in her father's intelligence-related activities, suggesting this long-standing intergenerational connection to intelligence work that predated Epstein's public notoriety. Moreover, Epstein allegedly exploited his connections to prestigious institutions. Harvard, where Dean Henry Rosowski was a mentor, and Rosowski Hall was named after him. The Interlochen Center for the Arts, where he built a scholarship lodge suspiciously near a junior girls' camp. The New York Academy of Art.
Using prestige to recruit.
Allegedly, yes. using these platforms to recruit victims, dangling the allure of education and career help, or, conversely, threatening them with ruin if they didn't comply. This reveals Epstein's long history in financial fraud, his deep connections to known intelligence figures, the highly organized international nature of his operations. The passports, the Maxwell links, highlight the scale and secrecy. His method of targeting vulnerable youth through prestigious institutions is a chilling detail, exposing the insidious nature of his predation.
The breadth of his connections, the chilling recruitment methods, his ability to move across borders with multiple identities, it truly paints a picture of a meticulously crafted international operation. So what does this all mean for the evolution of blackmail and control in our modern world? It's no longer just about discrete secrets. It's about technology, vast amounts of data, pervasive surveillance.
Right. A crucial aspect we need to consider is how these historical patterns of covert influence and control are now leveraging advanced technology, fundamentally transforming surveillance and information control into incredibly powerful tools. The Israeli government's Yasma program, for instance, explicitly aimed to foster tech startups. This led to companies like ComTouch, now known as Siren, founded by Gideon Mantel, a former IDF bomb squad officer.
Okay.
ComTouch's software became integrated into major operating systems, applications from giants like Microsoft, Google, Intel, Dell, operating unseen in the background of our digital lives, potentially collecting vast amounts of data.
Operating unseen.
Isabel Maxwell, Ghislaine's twin sister, played a key role in ComTouch, negotiating crucial deals with none other than Bill Gates, further cementing these high-level tech connections.
Gates and Isabel Maxwell.
Epstein himself attempted to rebrand as a tech investor, leveraging his connections to Edge.org, that exclusive network of prominent scientists, thinkers including Bill Gates, Nathan Myhrvold, Esther Dyson, potentially giving him privileged access to the elite of big tech.
So moving into tech influence.
Exactly. It suggests a clear shift towards data harvesting and mass surveillance as the new frontier of influence and control. Entities like Carbon 9/11, founded by former Israeli PM Ehud Barak and other Israeli intelligence veterans, embody this convergence of emergency services and surveillance capabilities, raising serious concerns about mass surveillance, akin to China's notorious IGA platform, its mass surveillance system. Domestically, the concept of Main Core, that database of unfriendly Americans for continuity of government protocols, clearly shows the U.S. national security state's own tech-fueled path towards pervasive data collection.
Right.
And Palantir, the powerful data analysis firm backed by the CIA's venture capital arm, InQtel. It essentially repurposed the Total Information Awareness TIA program, that controversial government surveillance initiative, as a private entity.
Privatized mass surveillance.
Effectively. This allowed Palantir to operate with plausible deniability, freeing it from government constraints and oversight while still providing similar, if not enhanced, surveillance capabilities. This really forces the question: how has the underworld of spies and crooks adapted to not just exploit, but fundamentally reshape the digital age?
Yeah.
And what does this relentless pursuit of data and technological control mean for our fundamental privacy and freedom in an increasingly interconnected world?
It's a chilling evolution.
What we've explored today is, well, it's a chilling, meticulously documented history of interconnected networks, organized crime syndicates, intelligence agencies, powerful individuals operating consistently in the shadows. They've used everything from sophisticated financial schemes and clandestine arms trafficking to sexual blackmail and advanced surveillance technology to exert control and manipulate events. From the back rooms of Tammany Hall and the covert operations of World War II, right up to the highest levels of the White House and the boardrooms of Silicon Valley. These threads run deep, they run long, and they continue to influence our world in ways we are only perhaps beginning to comprehend.
So what does this all mean for you? For us, navigating this complex landscape, as information increasingly becomes the ultimate currency and as personal privacy diminishes in the face of our pervasive digital footprints, the methods of control we've discussed today are only growing more sophisticated, harder to detect. Given this long, detailed history of interwoven power, crime, and intelligence, how might the next evolution of influence and control manifest, especially in a world increasingly reliant on artificial intelligence, ubiquitous data, and the very technology that underpins our daily lives? We invite you to keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep digging.